So the scope of the topic is very ambitious because if I want to talk about fundamentals of European legal identity, this is already a story, something, so to speak. And to put it in the context of migrations is a huge challenge. So I tried to pick and synthesize as much as possible, and hopefully the general synthesis will be somehow somewhat valuable. So starting with fundamental determinants of European legal identity. My position is that, in fact, the very legal reasoning, discussion about the law, discussion about the de lege ferenda shape of the statutory law, the discussion about judicial review, especially in the constitutional context, these are to a significant degree predetermined by certain meta-determinants. So in a very significant way, the discussion is over, or even our thinking process is already predetermined or over before it starts, depending which assumptions we make at the beginning. And in my view, also to relate to Dr. Gielki's speech, there are certain let's say currents that shape our thinking, and which currents we adapt, often subconsciously, I think, will then guide us in certain directions. And these are all very general, almost universal. I would argue universal. And so this, I think that this plurality does not only result from different legal traditions in different countries, but also about like adoptions and different currents of thinking in different countries. So beginning with something very familiar and very fundamental, and I think close to most of us, if not all of us, fundamental trend foundations on the European thinking, philosophy, also law, the Greeks. So things like theory of justice, law as a reflection of an objective ethical order that is justice, notion of equity that's be correcting formal justice, also notions of equality before the law, freedom of speech, equal access to public office, and one can go on and go on and go on and go into details how these notions were formulated by the great Greek thinkers, what was the plurality within their thoughts, how we can interpret these thoughts, and how they shaped our future development, also including the law. Roman law, of course, profound effect on private law, which profound effect on our way of thinking about the law, our terminology, but also Roman law being affected by Greek philosophy and also independently developed, proposed the idea of saturating legal norms with ethical postulates such as kindness and humanity. Very powerful tradition, very influential to this day. Christianity, of course. Well, the influence of Christianity on European legal tradition and European civilization is unquestionable, profound, and this is a story which could be continued and analyzed without end. But to give just some examples, to choose some issues, influenced via canon law over general different legal systems, and insistence on protection of marriage as a permanent legal institution, but also to go deeper. Well, the assumption that there is a creator also forces us to believe that there is some kind of objective reality, there are some objective rules, and this also sets certain framework on our minds, and this framework then steers us in our legal reasonings and legal perceptions. Well, to getting closer to our times, the ideas of enlightenment celebration of reason, questioning of authority, belief in progress, that the human history is a history of progress that will continue, this strong self-belief in the power of reason, of organizing, discovering nature, discovering including human nature, and improving the condition of humanity. And finally, and particularly interestingly, I think, postmodernism, which is a very nebulous concept, but very influential concept in my belief, and it also has a very important influence over the law. Well, as I said, it's nebulous, but if you want to find some kind of outline, I would point to the questioning of objective reality, that there is no such a thing as objective reality. There is no such a thing as objective truth. There is not such a thing as truth with capital T. There is not such a thing. Questioning science and technology, questioning reason, questioning logic. So even logic as something that's not, let's say, objectively real, rather all of that, even language itself, would be perceived as a tool determined by a power structure, referring to what Dr. Rielke said, power structures determined by interest of the privileged groups, mostly aimed as defending these privileges and protecting the interests of the privileged groups. Things that should be maybe not dismantled necessarily, but deconstructed, ignored, fought against, or used if they are useful for the moment, but not treated as something objectively binding. So these assumptions are not theoretical in my belief. They determine to a large degree very important, or even basic, I would say, conflicts in our contemporary legal discourse, or even civilizational discourse, including abortion. So if one believes in objective reality, then one would believe that there is something that human being exists objectively, and this existence starts somewhere. It might be difficult to pinpoint the precise moment where this existence starts. Maybe it will be even impossible, but it happens. And if we get it wrong, either in statutory law or in the process of constitutional review, then we are at risk that we are actually allowing or promoting of murder of innocent people. So this very assumption that there is something existing truthfully and objectively from us will tend to guide us, I believe, to be very cautious about abortion, and will, let's say, steer us away from broadening the scope and of freedom of abortion. On the other hand, if there is no objective truth, there is not such a thing as an objective moment when a human being comes into existence, and a proposal that there is such a moment will be viewed as an oppressive tool of ruling privileged groups, let's say, to oppress and exploit maybe not minorities, but exploited groups of people. So then logic is not important, or it's not of a crucial value. The most important issue would be the freedom of a marginalized group that must be realized, and even if this position would be somehow illogical, even the logic will be questioned. So that shifts the discourse, and depending which view we have, like this which meta view, let's say, we have, will to a large degree steer out the whole discussion. Freedom and human identity. So if, for the discussion's sake, if I would say that I believe and I identify myself, and I'm really serious, as an elf, and this is my experience, this is my reality, you are not allowed to tell me or even signal that I'm not an elf. Who are you to speak about my internal reality? Somebody will say, but it's not true. What is truth? Truth was created, this notion of truth was created, such person would say, by the oppressive class, oppressive groups who want to limit my freedom. So I would disregard the notion of truth. So you could say my position is illogical. And I would say this logic is a tool of an oppressive group. And I dismiss it. because this is my freedom, this is my reality, and nobody can impose the rules. And everybody must respect them. And well, if somebody believes in objective reality, right, and then talks about the lege ferenda postulates or constitutional review, the direction would be that, well, I'm not an elf. I can think that I am one, right? But this is not real, and the legal system will not protect that. But with the postmodernist view, my experience, especially if I'm in a marginalized group, predetermines and dictates the whole discussion. And logic, objective reality, they are just tools to be, they are part of the oppression, the oppressive culture that needs to be dismantled, destroyed, and sometimes used, but only when it's like purposeful from the point of view of the interest and freedom of the perceived interest group. So sometimes I will be logical and demand logic, but sometimes I will ignore logic because this is something just that to be used or dismantled. Attitude towards the nation state. Is nation state something valuable, something to be cherished, something to be developed, or is it another concept that serves the privileged groups to oppress minorities and should be dismantled and replaced by, well, this postmodernist mechanism that will insist on they would say protecting the rights and freedoms of minorities. I don't think it's protecting the interests of anybody, but this reasoning could go in such a direction. So this, let's say, dilemmas, these areas of conflict, this pre-existing assumptions that then determine to a large degree the later stories of our civilizational conflict within European identity, they're pretty universal. It's not that they exist. They exist in some countries. Let's say they are more influential in some than the others. And they create a very important conflict. So how does it relate to migration? So we have existing very important conflicts, but now we have arrival of persons from different cultural backgrounds who bring with them their own points of view, their own traditions, their own ways of thinking and assumptions. And the civilization of Islam here is particularly noteworthy, I believe. Why? Because well, first of all, this is a large, significant group numerically, but also because of its very strong and distinctive identity. So it's a whole civilization which developed largely independently from the European one, and is therefore different in many fundamental assumptions. Well, certain similarities, of course, can be identified. So it was also influenced by Greek philosophy to a large degree. It had its golden age, the technical progress like algebra, light, alcohol. So accomplishments of Islamic civilizations are very, very noteworthy. But still, it's a, let's say, different world that was developing largely independently. And then when we have our internal differences and conflicts, then we add another set of values and differences create tension, because if we have, the more in common we have with each other, the more areas for conflict there are, because it's just normal for us that certain things are done a certain way. The more different we are, the more difficult it is to find a common ground. So, for example, in Western Europe, when this culture is also already quite present, there are already very divisive problems, like the debate over hijab. So, should hijab be worn in public places, right? So, as we know, in France, with the concept of laïcité, there is a trend of limiting that. And even the postmodernism, let's say, current in European legal tradition has a problem with that. Because on the one hand, they see hijab, the headscarf, as a tool of oppression of women, and the women needs to be liberated and protected from this tool of oppression. But on the other hand, this is also viewed that as an expression of European colonial supremacist, that we will forbid women from wearing hijab, and this is and impose Western social values on them, preventing them from exercising their freedom. So completely new problems arrive, and new cultural and legal issues. So, what is the conclusion of that? If a country wants to continue, in my opinion, or wants to start a journey of introducing the whole new civilizational, let's say, element within their culture, this country needs to assume that there will be tensions and very important challenges connected therewith, and these tensions and challenges need to be anticipated, considered, and prepared for if this path is to be continued or started. And one should also assume that this internal division that will happen, will result from this new elements, will be exploited and aggravated by external factors in the geopolitical context. So as we all know, the geopolitical situation is getting more and more dangerous, and this is a new area for internal destabilization, for external actors acting in bad faith. In other words, we are really like struggling internally with the basic fundamentals of our legal reasoning and way of thinking, actually, our perception of reality, state, society, and it would be naive to believe that if we have a lot of like new people coming in, that they will just, by crossing the border, they magically will drop their whole civilization and magically adapt our ways of thinking. That will not happen. This will be much more complicated, and I believe should be considered always when debates about migrations are taking place. Thank you very much for your attention.